Airlines have ordered over 14,000 jets from Boeing and Airbus, enough to keep factories busy into the 2030s, yet many of those planes will never carry a single passenger. These eye-popping orders are not just about growing fleets. They are strategic, financial moves and tradable assets worth tens of millions of dollars before they are ever built. So, why do airlines keep announcing aircraft they know they will never fly, and who actually profits from this booming paper race? The answer rewrites everything you think you know about the business of aviation. Every year, Boeing and Airbus release glossy press statements celebrating another record-breaking haul of aircraft orders. Behind the headlines, the numbers are almost hard to believe. At the end of 2023, Boeing's official backlog stood at 5,626 commercial jets. Airbus reported 8,598 aircraft still waiting for delivery. Together, that is more than 14,000 planes, enough to keep both manufacturers' assembly lines running at full tilt for at least a decade, even if not a single new order came in. The scale is staggering. On the A320neo line, Airbus has already sold out production slots for years to come, with new customers looking at delivery dates stretching well into the 2030s. Boeing's 737 MAX program tells a similar story, with the company telling investors that its schedule for new deliveries extends deep into the next decade. For airlines, securing a place in this queue is not just about adding capacity, it is about locking in a future that is already spoken for. But the backlog is not a static ledger. Every year, hundreds of aircraft quietly disappear from these order books. Some are cancelled outright, others are converted to different models, and many are simply deferred, lingering on paper long after their original delivery date has passed. Boeing's own records show that in the wake of the 737 MAX grounding and the COVID shock, more than 1,100 orders vanished from its backlog between 2019 and 2021. Airbus also saw hundreds of orders deferred or cancelled during the pandemic, with some never returning. Despite this churn, the headline numbers keep climbing. The industry's own filings reveal that a non-trivial slice of every year's celebrated orders will never reach a runway. Company reports routinely acknowledge the risk. Not every contract will result in a delivered aircraft. Yet the spectacle of the order announcement persists, each one feeding the myth of unstoppable growth. The real question is not how many planes are on order, but why so many of them exist only on paper, and what makes these phantom aircraft so valuable before they ever leave the factory floor. A delivery slot is more than just a date on a factory schedule. For airlines, it is a ticket to the front of a very long line, often stretching a decade or more into the future. Airbus and Boeing can only build so many jets each month. When supply chain problems or regulatory delays slow the pace, those early positions become even more valuable. Airlines that secured their slots early, sometimes years before competitors, hold a right that others are desperate to acquire. But a slot is not a physical object. It is a contractual right, tied to a specific month and aircraft model buried deep in annexes of purchase agreements. The fine print often includes assignment or novation clauses, allowing airlines to transfer their place in the queue to another airline or to a leasing company if the manufacturer agrees. These transfers rarely make headlines, but they happen routinely behind closed doors. Industry filings and trade press confirm that such assignments are a standard feature of large order books. In periods of high demand, the value of an early slot can soar. Aviation finance experts estimate that a narrow-body delivery position, like those for the A320neo or 737 MAX, can fetch a premium worth millions or even tens of millions over what a later slot might command. For wide bodies, the numbers can go higher still. The reason is simple. An airline that gets a new fuel-efficient jet ahead of schedule can open new routes, cut operating costs, and win market share years before rivals waiting at the back of the line. This hidden market for slots is not always a direct sale. Sometimes, a struggling airline defers or cancels part of its order, freeing up delivery positions that are then quietly reassigned by the manufacturer to a more eager buyer. Other times, a lessor steps in, assuming the contract and later leasing the aircraft to whichever airline needs it most. Norwegian Air Shuttle's order book, reshuffle, and Delta's inherited, then cancelled Northwest 787 slots are just two examples of how these assets move around the industry. The specifics of the deals, including any premium paid, are almost never disclosed. But the economic logic is clear. When factory capacity is scarce, the right to a delivery slot becomes a tradable asset, sometimes worth more than the plane itself. A former fleet planner describes it this way: "You are not just ordering an airplane, you are buying an option on the future. If your plans change, you can sell that option, sometimes for a lot more than you paid." In a world where demand is unpredictable and production lines are full, the slot itself becomes a form of currency. It is a game played quietly, but the stakes can be enormous. The backlog is not just a list of future planes, it is a marketplace of rights and opportunities traded among airlines, lessors, and financiers long before a single jet rolls out of the hangar. On June 29, 2021, United Airlines announced the largest aircraft purchase in its history: 270 new jets from Boeing and Airbus. The press release landed just after sunrise, packed with superlatives, the biggest single order by a US carrier in more than a decade. A combined list price value north of $30 billion, and a bold promise to modernize United's fleet. By the closing bell that day, Boeing's stock had climbed sharply. Over the next 24 hours, trading volume surged well above average. Financial news outlets did not mince words. This was a vote of confidence in the 737 MAX and a headline that signaled recovery for both United and Boeing after years of turbulence. For the market, the specifics of when those jets would actually fly did not matter. Investors and analysts zeroed in on the scale of the order, the implied growth, and the story of a company back on the offensive. Stock models were updated, price targets nudged higher. United's management made the rounds on business TV, describing a once-in-a-generation fleet renewal. The actual delivery timeline, stretching out over several years, was buried deep in the footnotes. Aviation analysts point out that these blockbuster announcements are often less about operational planning and more about sending a message. A mega order can lift an airline's share price, boost an original equipment manufacturer's market value, and trigger a wave of positive coverage, regardless of whether the full order is ever fulfilled. The effect is immediate: a spike in market capitalization, executive bonuses tied to share performance, and a sense of momentum that can influence everything from credit ratings to supplier negotiations. The pattern repeats across the industry. When Air India unveiled its 470 aircraft order in 2023, the headlines dominated financial news for days, even as delivery schedules and final fleet plans remained fluid. For airlines and manufacturers alike, the spectacle of the order is a powerful tool, one that shapes perception long before the first jet leaves the assembly line. The numbers on paper become a kind of currency, traded in the marketplace of investor confidence. Pre-delivery payments, or PDPs, signal that an aircraft order has moved beyond intent. Once a contract is signed, airlines begin transferring significant sums to manufacturers years before a plane ever leaves the factory floor. These payments follow a strict schedule, with an initial deposit at signing, followed by a series of milestone payments as the aircraft advances through design, assembly, and final production. By delivery, the airline has typically paid 20 to 30% of the aircraft's list price, sometimes more, with the remainder due only when the jet is handed over. On the balance sheet, PDPs are recorded as assets, often labeled as prepayments on flight equipment or deposits on aircraft purchases. They are not expensed or depreciated until the aircraft is delivered and enters service. During the years between payment and delivery, airlines may capitalize interest on loans used to fund these PDPs, increasing the eventual book value of the jet. The International Air Transport Association confirms this industry standard that both PDPs and related borrowing costs are capitalized as part of the aircraft's cost and are not depreciated until the plane is operational. This accounting treatment shapes how airlines present their financial health. Cash is tied up in an asset that will not generate revenue for years, yet on paper it appears as a prudent investment. If an airline cancels or defers delivery, the fate of those capitalized PDPs depends on contract terms and negotiations with the manufacturer. They may be refunded, reassigned, or written off. Sometimes airlines sell PDP positions to lessors, who then take delivery and lease the aircraft back, effectively moving both the asset and its financing off the airline's books. A typical PDP timeline stretches over 3 or 4 years, with a modest deposit at signing, incremental payments at production milestones, and the final payment at delivery. For large orders, hundreds of millions in cash can be committed to jets that may never join the fleet. As one accounting expert notes, you can have hundreds of millions out the door before you ever see a tail number. Banks often finance these payments against the contract, not the aircraft itself, making the PDP an asset, a claim on a future plane, as much a financial instrument as future hardware. Buried in nearly every aircraft purchase agreement is a clause that allows airlines to defer scheduled deliveries, sometimes by months, sometimes by years. These provisions rarely attract attention during boom times, but they become lifelines when the market turns. The COVID-19 pandemic delivered the ultimate stress test for this flexibility. In 2019, Airbus delivered 863 commercial aircraft. By the end of 2020, that number fell to 566. Boeing's deliveries collapsed even more sharply, dropping from 380 to 157 in the same period. The sudden halt in global travel forced airlines to renegotiate, invoking deferral rights on a massive scale. A former airline chief financial officer describes the process as a series of tense calls and spreadsheet marathons. He remembers the moment this way. You are staring at a delivery schedule with 100 planes you no longer need, at least not right now. The first question is always, how many can we push back, and for how long? The manufacturers know the game. They would rather defer than cancel outright. That instinct to push back shapes negotiations. Public filings from 2020 and 2021 reveal a wave of airlines announcing revised fleet plans. Ryanair, Southwest, American, and United all pushed back 737 MAX deliveries. Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airways, and Cathay Pacific renegotiated wide-body arrivals. Norwegian, facing bankruptcy, cancelled nearly 100 Boeing jets, but many others simply shifted their schedules, turning firm orders into long-term options. In many cases, the original delivery slots were quietly reassigned to other customers or to lessors willing to step in. The scale of these adjustments is stark. Airbus's own statements refer to hundreds of aircraft subject to deferral during the pandemic. Boeing's backlog shrank by more than 1,000 orders through a combination of cancellations, conversions, and deferrals. Yet, on paper, many of these aircraft remain in the order book, their delivery dates sliding further into the future with every contract amendment. The result is an order book that looks robust, but is on paper rather than on runways. Deferral clauses do not just protect airlines from overcommitting, they transform the order book itself into a living document, one that can expand or contract with each economic cycle. During crises, the difference between a headline order and an actual delivery becomes painfully clear. The jets that do not vanish outright are often left in limbo, their fate decided not by operational need, but by the fine print of a contract. For every gleaming press release, There is a spreadsheet tracking which planes have been quietly put on hold, waiting for a market that may never fully return. Out in the Arizona desert, rows of commercial jets stretch to the horizon. Pinal Air Park, Mojave, Victorville. These names have become shorthand for the final stop in an aircraft's journey. At the height of the pandemic in 2020, more than 16,000 commercial aircraft sat parked worldwide, a staggering number not seen in modern aviation history. Many of these planes were less than a decade old, some barely out of warranty, yet their airlines had no use for them. Wide bodies like the Airbus A380, once the pride of international fleets, joined smaller jets in long-term storage, their logos fading under the sun. Airlines continued to announce new orders even as they quietly retired or mothballed aircraft with years of service left. The disconnect is hard to ignore. Jets ordered with fanfare end up grounded, sometimes after only a handful of years in the air. The desert boneyards offer a stark reminder. On paper, the industry is always growing, but on the ground, thousands of planes are left waiting for a future that never arrives. Official list prices for commercial jets have long been a fixture in press releases. With narrow bodies like the A320neo or 737 MAX once quoted at over $120 million apiece, and wide bodies climbing well past $300 million. But in practice, almost no airline pays anything close to these sticker prices. Industry analysts and lessor filings confirm that actual transaction prices are commonly discounted by 40 to 60%, especially for large headline-grabbing orders. These steep discounts reward volume, loyalty, and early commitments, but they also serve another purpose. They inflate the apparent value of the order book. When a carrier announces a $10 billion deal at list prices, the true cash commitment may be less than half that amount. For manufacturers, the optics matter. A robust backlog calculated at nominal prices reassures investors and suppliers that production lines will stay busy for years. Airlines, in turn, use the size of their orders to negotiate deeper discounts and favorable terms. The result is a system where inflated order books and dramatic price spreads are not a feature. They sustain the illusion of ever-growing demand, even as the real economics play out behind closed doors. More than half of the world's commercial aircraft fleet is now leased, not owned outright by airlines. In this market, leasing companies have become the real power brokers. Firms like AerCap, Avalon, and Air Lease Corporation command order books that rival those of major carriers, often holding hundreds of delivery slots for aircraft that may never fly for the customer originally named in the press release. Lessors step in when airlines defer or abandon orders, taking delivery themselves and then placing jets with whichever carrier needs capacity next. This creates a steady flow of aircraft moving between operators, sometimes spending more time on a lessor's balance sheet than in active service. Financial institutions and banks also profit by structuring loans, asset-backed securities, and complex leasing arrangements around these deliveries. Consultants and brokers earn fees on every transaction from the initial order to the eventual lease or sale. Even when an aircraft sits idle in storage, the paperwork can generate income for someone. The aviation supply chain has become a web of financial deals, where the real winners are often far removed from the runway. In the end, the system thrives not on the number of planes in the air, but on the volume of deals made on paper. Today, a jet order is as much a financial signal as a fleet plan, fueling stock prices, balance sheets, and boardroom games far beyond the tarmac. For investors and passengers alike, the numbers on order books do not always land in reality. In an industry built on movement, some of the boldest deals never leave the ground. What matters is not every plane promised, it is the ones that actually fly. Share your take below.